A bullied teen saved an elderly man from a fire. The words echoed like a headline in Ethan Parker's mind as he stared at his smoke-blackened hands, still trembling in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital waiting room. Even now, 3 hours after pulling Mr. Reynolds from the burning apartment building, Ethan couldn't believe what he had done. People like him, invisible, forgettable people, didn't become heroes. His lungs still burned from the smoke, a constant reminder of the moment when something inside him, some buried reservoir of courage he never knew existed, had finally awakened. Ethan glanced at his phone. 12:39 a.m. No messages. Not even from his mom, who was working another night shift and had no idea what had happened. Just another Tuesday night. Except it wasn't. The plastic chair creaked as Ethan shifted his weight. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and bad coffee, punctuated by the occasional announcement over the PA system. He should go home. There was no reason for him to stay. Mr. Reynolds was just a stranger. The old man from apartment 4B who sometimes nodded at Ethan in the hallway. Yet something kept Ethan rooted to the chair, as if leaving now would sever the only meaningful connection he'd made in months. Family of Gerald Reynolds? Ethan's head snapped up as a doctor approached, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the nearly empty waiting room. Ethan started, then stopped. What was he exactly? I'm the one who found him. In the fire. The doctor, her name tag read Doctor. Chen offered a tired smile. Are you Ethan? He nodded, surprised. Mr. Reynolds is asking for you. She gestured toward the hallway. He's stable. Smoke inhalation, minor burns, and a bit of dehydration. But he's going to be just fine thanks to you. Thanks to you. 3 words Ethan couldn't remember ever hearing before. Following Dr. Chen through the sterile corridors, Ethan tried to quiet the voice inside that kept asking why an old man would want to see the awkward, gangly 17-year-old who lived down the hall. The same 17-year-old who was the favorite punching bag of Westlake High's lacrosse team. The kid whose school locker had been vandalized so many times that the administration had simply stopped repainting it. Room 214 appeared before he was ready. Doctor, Chen knocked gently before pushing the door open. Your hero's here, Mr. Reynolds, she said warmly. The old man lay propped against white pillows, oxygen tubes in his nose, his weathered face pale but alert. When he saw Ethan, his eyes, a startling clear blue despite his age, crinkled at the corners. There he is, Mr. Reynolds said, his voice raspy but strong. The young man who decided an old fool like me was worth saving. Ethan stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, hands jammed in the pockets of his soot-stained jeans. Anyone would have done it, sir. But they didn't. You did. Mr. Reynolds gestured to the chair beside the bed. Please, Wes, sit. Unless you need to get home. Ethan shook his head and sank into the chair. Home was an empty apartment with leftover pizza and homework he hadn't started. Home could wait. I don't even know how to begin thanking you. The old man continued. The doctor tells me another few minutes in that smoke, and he trailed off, gazing at Ethan with a curious intensity that made the boy shift uncomfortably. It was nothing. Ethan mumbled, staring at his hands. I heard you calling for help. Nothing? Mr. Reynolds raised a bushy eyebrow. Young man, you broke down my door and carried me down 3 flights of stairs through a burning building. That's not nothing. Ethan's face flushed. Put that way, it did sound like something. Something decidedly not like him at all. I've lived a long life. Mr. Reynolds continued. 78 years. I've met presidents and paupers. But I've rarely met someone with the kind of raw courage you showed tonight. He leaned forward slightly, wincing at the movement. Tell me about yourself, Ethan. The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Ethan found himself answering honestly. There's not much to tell, sir. I'm a junior at Westlake High. I live with my mom. She works nights at the Sunrise Care Facility. I'm pretty good at math, I guess. Westlake, huh? Something flickered across the old man's face. Recognition, perhaps, or interest. And what do you like about Westlake? The laugh that escaped Ethan's lips was sharp and bitter. Nothing much to like. I keep my head down, try to get through each day. Mr. Reynolds studied him, those piercing blue eyes seeming to look straight through Ethan's carefully constructed defenses. That doesn't sound like the young man who ran into a burning building tonight. Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. That was different. How so? I don't know. It just was. Ethan struggled to find the words. There wasn't time to think about it. I just heard you calling, and I couldn't just walk away. A nurse entered with a tray of medications, interrupting their conversation. As she checked Mr. Reynolds' vitals, Ethan glanced at the clock. 1:17 रात के समय. Today, was a school day. I should probably go, he said, rising from the chair. I have class in the morning. Mr. Reynolds nodded. Of course, but would you consider coming back tomorrow? I find I enjoy your company, and there's so little to do in this place except watch terrible daytime television. The request caught Ethan off guard. No one ever sought out his company. Sure, he heard himself say. I could come after school. The smile that spread across the old man's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Excellent. I'll look forward to it. Walking home through the quiet streets, Ethan replayed the night's events in his head. The fire alarm blaring. The acrid smell of smoke. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk in various states of undress. Mrs. Delaney from 2A saying she thought everyone was out. Then the terrible realization that no one had seen old Mr. Reynolds. Without thinking, Ethan had run back into the building, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding against his ribs. Smoke had filled the third-floor hallway, thick and choking. He'd called out, heard a feeble response from 4B, and then blank determination. Breaking down the door, finding Mr. Reynolds collapsed near his kitchen. The terror and adrenaline of half-carrying, half-dragging the old man down the smoky stairwell. And now, for the first time in years, someone was actually looking forward to seeing him. Ethan glanced up at the night sky, where a few stars managed to shine through the city's light pollution. Something had changed tonight. He wasn't sure what exactly, but he could feel it, a shifting inside like the first tremors before an earthquake. Morning arrived with merciless brightness. Ethan dragged himself from bed after only 4 hours of sleep, his muscles protesting every movement. His throat felt raw, his eyes gritty. In the bathroom mirror, he hardly recognized the hollow-eyed stranger staring back at him. You look like hell, he told his reflection. His mother's note on the kitchen counter was the same as always. Breakfast in fridge. Love you. Mom. She would have gotten home from her shift just as Ethan was waking up and would now be asleep until late afternoon. Their lives existed in separate orbits, briefly intersecting in the hazy space between day and night. The microwave hummed as it heated yesterday's oatmeal. Ethan scrolled through his phone, scanning news sites for any mention of the apartment fire. A small article appeared on the local news page. Apartment fire on Maple Street, no serious injuries. There was no mention of a rescue, no mention of him. Somehow that felt right. The walk to Westlake High took 15 minutes, each step heavier than the last. Exhaustion dragged at Ethan like an anchor. The familiar dread built in his stomach as the school's red brick facade came into view. 6 hours to survive. Just keep your head down. Be invisible. But something was different. As he walked through the main entrance, he noticed people looking at him. Not the usual dismissive glances, but actual looks, curious, appraising. Parker. Ethan flinched automatically at the sound of his last name. Derek Simmons, lacrosse team captain and tormentor-in-chief, was striding toward him with unexpected purpose. Ethan braced himself for the usual. A shoulder check, a knocked-over backpack, some creative insult. Instead, Derek stopped directly in front of him, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Heard about what you did last night. The fire. Old guy. Ethan froze. How did Derek know? How did anyone know? Mrs. Delaney's daughter is in my Spanish class. Derek explained as if reading Ethan's confusion. She told everyone about it this morning. Oh. Ethan shifted his weight, waiting for the punchline. The inevitable twist that would turn this into another humiliation. But Derek just nodded, a gesture that seemed almost respectful. Pretty badass, man. Then he moved past Ethan toward his first class, leaving Ethan standing there, mouth slightly open in shock. Throughout the day, the strangeness continued. Teachers who normally looked through him suddenly called on him in class. Students who had never spoken to him asked about the fire. By lunchtime, the story had grown to mythic proportions. Ethan had apparently carried the old man through an inferno while the building collapsed around them. He sat alone at his usual cafeteria table, picking at a sandwich, overwhelmed by the attention. It felt wrong somehow, like wearing someone else's clothes. Is this seat taken? Ethan looked up to find Lily Chen. Yes, that Lily Chen, editor of the school newspaper, straight A student, and possibly the only person at Westlake who intimidated both students and teachers with her fierce intelligence, standing over him with a lunch tray. No. I mean, you can sit if you want. Ethan moved his backpack to make room. his heart suddenly racing for reasons that had nothing to do with near-death experiences. Lily sat down, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "So," she said without preamble, "I want to interview you for the paper. About the rescue." Ethan nearly choked on his water. "What? No. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. You saved someone's life." Lily's dark eyes held his with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. "That's pretty much the definition of a big deal. I just did what anyone would do." "But that's exactly it." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Most people wouldn't have done it. They'd have waited for the firefighters, told themselves it was too dangerous, that they might get hurt. You didn't. Why?" The question hung between them. Ethan stared at his sandwich, searching for an answer that made sense. "I don't know," he finally said. "I just couldn't not help." Lily studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. "That's what makes it a story worth telling." She pulled out a notebook. "So who was he?" "The man you saved?" "Just an old guy who lives in my building. Mr. Reynolds. I don't really know him that well. But you're going to visit him in the hospital?" Ethan blinked. "How did you—" "Sophie Delaney's mom works at St. Mary's. Apparently you were there until the middle of the night." Lily shrugged at his surprised expression. "Small world. So are you going back?" "After school." Ethan wasn't sure why he was telling her this, except that Lily Chen had a way of making questions sound like they required answers. "Good." She wrote something in her notebook. "I'd like to come with you, if that's okay. Meet him, maybe get a quote or two." "I don't think it would really help with the story." Her expression softened slightly. "Plus, I bet he'd enjoy the company. Hospitals can be lonely places." Ethan wanted to refuse. This sudden attention was already overwhelming, and the thought of Lily Chen, brilliant, composed Lily Chen, observing his awkward attempts at conversation with Mr. Reynolds made his palms sweat. But there was something in her expression, a genuine interest that seemed to extend beyond just getting a good story. "Okay," he found himself saying, "but I can't promise he'll want to talk to a reporter." Lily smiled, a quick flash of warmth that transformed her serious face. "I'll take my chances." As they made plans to meet after the final bell, Ethan had the distinct feeling that his life had veered sharply off its expected course, as if the universe had suddenly decided to rewrite his story without consulting him first. The hospital seemed less intimidating in daylight. Ethan and Lily walked through the sliding glass doors together, an unlikely pair. She had changed after school into dark jeans and a crisp white shirt that somehow managed to look both professional and casual. Beside her, Ethan felt particularly rumpled in his faded jeans and the one clean t-shirt he'd found in his drawer this morning. "You don't have to be nervous," Lily said as they approached the information desk. "We're just visiting an elderly man, not facing a firing squad." "I'm not nervous." Ethan lied, his stomach performing elaborate gymnastics routines that suggested otherwise. The receptionist directed them to a different room. Mr. Reynolds had been moved from the ER to a regular room on the 4th floor. As they rode the elevator up, Ethan found himself wondering what he would say. Last night had been different. Extraordinary circumstances, adrenaline, the lateness of the hour. In the harsh light of day, what could he possibly offer that would interest someone like Mr. Reynolds? Room 412 had the door partially open. Ethan knocked gently. "Come in." Mr. Reynolds' voice sounded stronger today. They entered to find the old man sitting up in bed, reading glasses perched on his nose, a book open on his lap. The oxygen tubes were gone, and though his face still showed signs of fatigue, his eyes brightened at the sight of Ethan. "Right on time," he said, marking his place in the book. Then his gaze shifted to Lily. "And you've brought a friend." "This is Lily Chen," Ethan said. "She's, from school." "From the newspaper." "School newspaper?" Mr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, an unreadable expression crossing his face. Lily stepped forward, offering her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reynolds. I hope you don't mind my intrusion. I'm doing a story on Ethan's heroism, and I thought—" "Heroism, is it?" Mr. Reynolds chuckled, shaking her hand. "Well, I won't argue with that assessment. Though our young hero here seems reluctant to accept the title," he gestured to the chairs beside the bed. "Please, let's sit. I've been bored to tears all day." As they settled in, Ethan noticed a large bouquet of flowers on the windowsill that hadn't been there the night before. Mr. Reynolds followed his gaze. "From the Residents Association," he explained. "Apparently surviving a fire makes one quite popular." How are you feeling?" Ethan asked. "Like I've been rescued from a burning building by a teenager." Mr. Reynolds replied dryly, but considerably better than yesterday. The doctor says I might be released tomorrow, though I'll need to find temporary housing until the building is declared safe. You could stay at Sunrise? Ethan suggested automatically. Where my mom works. It's a nice place. Mr. Reynolds studied him curiously. That's a very kind suggestion, Ethan. Lily pulled out her notebook. Mr. Reynolds, would you mind telling me your perspective on what happened last night? It would really help with the article. For the next 20 minutes, Mr. Reynolds recounted the events of the fire, how he'd fallen asleep with a book, woken to the alarm but found himself disoriented in the smoke, how he'd called for help as his lungs began to burn. He described the moment Ethan had appeared in his apartment like an angel in a smoke-filled hell. Though a rather gangly angel, he added with a wink at Ethan. Lily scribbled notes furiously, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Ethan sat quiet and uncomfortable, hearing the events described in such dramatic terms. It didn't sound like him at all, this brave, decisive person who acted without hesitation. And Ethan, Lily turned to him, pen poised. What went through your mind when you realized someone was still in the building? The question caught him off guard. I don't know if I was really thinking anything. It was more like feeling. I just knew I couldn't leave, even though you might have been seriously hurt. Or worse. Ethan shifted in his chair. I guess I didn't consider that part. Instinct. Mr. Reynolds interjected. The truest form of character reveals itself in moments when there's no time to think, only to act. He fixed Ethan with that piercing blue gaze. That's why what you did matters so much, young man. It wasn't calculated. It was pure. The word hung in the air between them. Pure. Nothing in Ethan's life had ever felt pure. Not his motives, not his thoughts, certainly not his courage. A nurse entered to check Mr. Reynolds' vital signs, providing a welcome interruption. While she worked, Lily leaned over to Ethan. He's fascinating, she whispered. Do you know anything about him? His background? Ethan shook his head. He's just lived in our building for as long as I can remember. Keeps to himself, mostly. When the nurse left, Lily directed her questions toward Mr. Reynolds' life. Had he lived in the city long? What was his profession before retirement? The old man answered with good humor but surprising vagueness. Yes, he'd been in the city for many decades. He'd worked in education. He had no immediate family. Just a few distant relatives who send dutiful Christmas cards. There was something practiced about his deflections, Ethan noticed. The way Mr. Reynolds would answer a question while somehow revealing almost nothing of substance. Well, Lily finally said, closing her notebook, I think I have enough for a great article. Thank you both. She stood and extended her hand to Mr. Reynolds. I hope you recover quickly, sir. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I look forward to reading your journalistic debut. Oh, I've written dozens of articles, Lily said with a small smile. But this might be my favorite so far. She turned to Ethan. Are you staying longer? I can wait if you want. I'll stay a bit, Ethan said, surprising himself with the decision. You don't have to wait. After Lily left, a comfortable silence settled between Ethan and Mr. Reynolds. The old man picked up his book. Ethan noticed it was To Kill a Mockingbird, but didn't open it. She's quite impressive, Mr. Reynolds remarked. Your friend. She's not really my friend, Ethan admitted. Today was the first time she's ever spoken to me. Ah, Mr. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. The fire has changed things for you at school? People are acting weird, like they suddenly see me or something. And how does that feel? Ethan considered the question. Uncomfortable, like I'm wearing someone else's skin. Because you don't see yourself as they see you now? I guess not. Mr. Reynolds set his book aside. Ethan, may I ask you something rather direct? Sure. You mentioned keeping your head down at school. Is it more than just typical teenage social awkwardness? Are you having difficulties there? The question was posed gently, but it still hit like a physical blow. Ethan stared at his hands, wondering why he felt compelled to answer honestly. Some of the guys there, they've made it their mission to make my life hell since freshman year. The admission felt both painful and strangely liberating. It's stupid. I should be able to handle it. Bullying is never stupid, Mr. Reynolds said, his voice taking on a hardness Ethan hadn't heard before. And it's not about whether you can handle it. It's about them being cruel, which is never acceptable. Something in the old man's vehemence made Ethan look up. Mr. Reynolds' face had flushed slightly, his hands gripping the edge of his blanket. It matters to me very much, he continued more quietly, that the young man who saved my life is suffering in a place where he should feel safe. The statement hung in the air between them, weighted with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite identify. Before he could respond, Mr. Reynolds' expression softened. Would you do something for me, Ethan? Since I'm stuck in this bed until tomorrow at least? Of course. My apartment, what's left of it, has some items I'd very much like to have with me. Personal things. The fire department told me the damage was primarily in the living room. My bedroom should be relatively untouched. He reached for a pen and paper from the bedside table. I can give you a list, and my spare key is with Mrs. Delaney in 2A. They're letting people back in the building? Only briefly and only with escort. I called the fire chief this morning. He smiled. Being old has its advantages. People assume you're harmless and indulge your requests. Ethan found himself nodding. I can go after school tomorrow. What do you need? Mr. Reynolds wrote a short list. A leather-bound journal from the bedside table, a small wooden box from the closet shelf, some clothes, his medication from the bathroom cabinet. And if you see my old fountain pen anywhere, I'd be most grateful. It has great sentimental value. I'll find everything, Ethan promised. I know you will. Mr. Reynolds handed him the list. Now you should go home and rest. You look exhausted, and I suspect you didn't get much sleep last night. As Ethan stood to leave, the old man reached out and caught his wrist. The touch was light but firm. Thank you for coming, Ethan. It means more than you know. Something about the earnestness in the old man's voice made Ethan's throat tight. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and slipped out of the room. In the hospital corridor, he unfolded the list, studying Mr. Reynolds' elegant handwriting. There was something profound about being trusted with someone's personal possessions, especially someone who, just 2 days ago, had been a stranger. The responsibility felt weighty and somehow significant, as if the universe were testing him yet again. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the city in golden light. Ethan took a deep breath, filling his lungs with fresh air. For the first time in months, he walked without hunching his shoulders, without trying to make himself smaller. It wasn't confidence exactly, but something adjacent to it, a newfound awareness that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as invisible as he'd thought. The school hallway buzzed with the particular energy of a Friday afternoon. Students rushing toward the weekend, slamming lockers, making plans. Ethan stood at his own locker, methodically sorting through textbooks, when a newspaper was thrust in front of his face. Hot off the presses, Lily said, a hint of pride in her voice. Freiman front page. Ethan took the paper. There it was in bold print. Local teen hero saves elderly resident in apartment fire. Below the headline was a photo of Ethan, one he didn't remember being taken, sitting in class, his expression serious as he concentrated on something off camera. Where did you get this picture? He asked, scanning the article with a mixture of fascination and horror. Yearbook archives, Lily admitted. I didn't think you'd appreciate me taking one yesterday. She leaned against the locker next to his. So? What do you think? Ethan read the first paragraph, which described him as quiet but courageous, and the rescue as an act of spontaneous heroism that exemplifies the best of Westlake's values. The words seemed to describe someone else entirely. It's well written, he managed. Lily rolled her eyes. That's not what I asked. It's weird, okay? Reading about myself like this. He folded the paper carefully. But thanks for making it sound good. I didn't make anything sound good, Ethan. I just reported what happened. She studied him curiously. Are you visiting him again today? Ethan nodded. He asked me to get some things from his apartment. The fire department is letting people in briefly. Want company? The offer caught him off guard. You want to come to a burned apartment building? I want to follow up on the story, she said, but something in her expression suggested there might be more to it. They agreed to meet outside the school at 3:30. As Lily walked away, Ethan noticed Derek Simmons watching them from across the hall, an unreadable expression on his face. When their eyes met, Derek didn't look away or sneer, as he usually would. Instead, he gave a slight nod, the same almost respectful gesture from the day before turning to join his friends. The interaction left Ethan feeling disoriented, as if he'd stepped into a parallel universe where the fundamental rules of his existence had subtly shifted. By the time the final bell rang, Ethan had received 23 versions of, "Hey, I saw you in the paper," and 15 variations of, "That was really cool what you did." Each comment left him more bewildered than the last. 3 years of near invisibility, and suddenly everyone seemed to know his name. Lily was waiting by the school entrance, camera bag slung over her shoulder. At Ethan's questioning look, she shrugged. For the follow-up piece, if that's okay. The walk to Maple Street was surprisingly comfortable. Lily asked questions about Mr. Reynolds, how long Ethan had known him, what he was like, but didn't press when Ethan's answers revealed how little he actually knew about the old man. It's strange, Ethan said as they turned onto Maple. I've lived in the same building as him for years, but until 2 days ago, we'd never really spoken. Sometimes it takes a crisis to bring people together, Lily observed, though usually not quite so dramatically. The apartment building came into view, its facade blackened around several third-floor windows. Yellow caution tape cordoned off the entrance, where a firefighter stood checking identification against a list of residents. After verifying Ethan's address and his permission to retrieve items for Mr. Reynolds, the firefighter escorted them inside. The lobby smelled strongly of smoke, and the usually polished floors were grimy with soot and water damage. You've got 15 minutes, the firefighter said as they climbed the stairs. Third floor sustained the most damage. Watch your step and don't touch any electrical fixtures. The third floor hallway was a scene of devastation. Black char marks streaked the walls and the carpet squelched underfoot, still sodden from the fire hoses. The door to 4B, Mr. Reynolds' apartment, hung crookedly from a single hinge. Ethan paused at the threshold, suddenly transported back to that moment. The heat, the smoke, the fear clawing at his throat as he'd called out for Mr. Reynolds. Lily placed a gentle hand on his arm. You okay? He nodded, pushing the memories away. Fine. Inside, the apartment told the story of the fire's progression. The living room was a charred ruin, furniture reduced to skeletal frames, wallpaper peeled away in blackened strips, windows shattered. But as Mr. Reynolds had predicted, the fire had been contained before reaching the bedroom and bathroom. Lily took a few photos while Ethan moved purposefully through the apartment, gathering the items on the list. The leather journal was exactly where Mr. Reynolds had said it would be, seemingly untouched by the fire. The wooden box required standing on a chair to reach the closet's top shelf. In the bathroom, Ethan collected the medications, carefully reading each label to ensure he had the right ones. As he was leaving, he spotted a silver fountain pen on the small desk by the bedroom window. It must have rolled there during the chaos of the fire. With the fountain pen safely tucked in his pocket, Ethan did one final sweep of the bedroom. On the dresser, a framed photograph caught his eye. A much younger Mr. Reynolds standing in front of an imposing building, his arm around a smiling woman. The building looked vaguely familiar, but Ethan couldn't place it. Found everything? Lily asked from the doorway. I think so. Ethan placed the last items in the backpack he'd brought. We should go. As they left the apartment, Lily paused to take one last photo of the damaged doorway. Did you notice anything strange? She asked as they headed back down the stairs. Everything about this is strange. No, I mean about his apartment. She lowered her voice, though there was no one nearby to overhear. It seemed, I don't know, not like a typical elderly person's home. No knickknacks, no family photos except that one. Minimal furniture. Almost like he doesn't really live there. Ethan finished her thought. He'd had the same impression. The apartment felt more like a hotel room than a home, despite Mr. Reynolds supposedly having lived there for years. Lily nodded. Exactly. Outside, the daylight was fading, casting long shadows across the street. Ethan checked the time, almost 5. I should get these things to the hospital. Mind if I tag along? When Ethan hesitated, Lily added, just to the hospital. I won't intrude on your visit. The walk to St. Darasuri Severin Mary's felt different this time, more comfortable, as if they'd crossed some invisible boundary from strangers to something approaching friends. Lily told him about her ambitions for the school paper, how she wanted to cover real issues instead of just school dances and cafeteria complaints. Ethan found himself telling her about his interest in engineering, how he liked to take apart old electronics and rebuild them. You should join the robotics club, Lily suggested. They're always looking for people who understand how things work. The idea that he might belong somewhere, might have something to offer a group, was so novel that Ethan didn't know how to respond. At the hospital entrance, Lily stopped. I meant what I said. I won't intrude. She hesitated, then added, but maybe text me later? Let me know how he's doing. Ethan nodded, suddenly aware that he didn't have her number. As if reading his mind, Lily pulled out her phone. Here, put your number in. After they exchanged contacts, Lily gave him a small smile. See you Monday, Ethan. He watched her walk away, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. Twice in one day, someone had looked forward to seeing him again. Hey, Mr. Reynolds was sitting in a chair by the window when Ethan entered room 412, dressed in hospital-issued pajamas, but looking considerably more lively than the day before. "Ah, my delivery man arrives," he said with a smile. "Please tell me you've brought something more interesting than this hospital food." Ethan set the backpack on the bed. "Everything on your list, plus a few extra clothes I thought might be useful." "Mr." Reynolds' eyes lit up as Ethan carefully unpacked the items. The journal, the wooden box, the medications, several changes of clothes. When Ethan produced the fountain pen, the old man's face transformed with genuine delight. "You found it." He took the pen reverently, turning it over in his gnarled hands. "This was a gift, you know, many years ago from someone very special." "The woman in the photograph?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. "Mr." Reynolds looked up sharply. "You saw a photograph? On your dresser. You and a woman standing in front of some building." Something shifted in the old man's expression, a softening like ice beginning to thaw. "Yes," he said quietly. "That was Eleanor, my wife. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." No, Mr." Reynolds waved away the apology. "It's natural to be curious." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit, please. I think perhaps it's time we got to know each other a bit better, don't you?" As Ethan sat down, Mr. Reynolds carefully opened the wooden box. Inside was an assortment of items that seemed random at first glance. A tarnished key, a smooth river stone, a faded blue ribbon, several old photographs. "Mementos," Mr. Reynolds explained. "Little anchors to the past." He lifted out one of the photographs and handed it to Ethan. It showed a much younger version of Mr. Reynolds, perhaps in his 30s, standing proudly in front of a construction site. Behind him, the skeleton of a large building was taking shape. 1972. Mr. Reynolds said, "The beginning of a dream." Ethan studied the photo. There was something familiar about the structure, something in the distinctive shape of its entrance. "The building in this photo," he said slowly, "is it the same one from the picture in your apartment? The one with your wife?" Mr. Reynolds nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Very observant, Ethan. Yes, it's the same building, just at different stages. That photograph in my apartment was taken on opening day, 1974. "What was it? The building?" Instead of answering directly, Mr. Reynolds asked, "How long have you attended Westlake High School, Ethan?" "Almost 3 years. Since freshman year. And in that time, have you ever visited the Hall of Records? The room off the main library with all the school's historical documents and photographs?" Ethan shook his head, a creeping suspicion beginning to form in the back of his mind. "If you had," Mr. Reynolds continued, "you might have seen a rather large portrait on the east wall. A man and woman standing in front of a brand new school building. The plaque beneath it reads Gerald and Eleanor Reynolds, founders of Westlake Academy, 1974. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan stared at the old man, understanding dawning like a slow sunrise. "You're," he began but couldn't finish the sentence. "Gerald Reynolds," the old man confirmed, "founder and first headmaster of what would eventually become Westlake High School." Ethan sat back in his chair, mind reeling. "But why didn't you say anything? Yesterday when Lily was here, talking about the school paper, would it have changed anything?" Mr. Reynolds asked gently. "Would it have altered the fact that you saved my life, not knowing who I was?" "No, but besides," Mr. Reynolds continued, "I left that position a long time ago. Stepped down after Eleanor passed in 1992. The school board wanted to modernize, expand. I'd become something of a relic." He smiled sadly. "It happens to institutions as well as people, you know. But you're the founder," Ethan insisted. "Your name is literally on the building." "The West Wing Library, yes. Though I suspect most students don't make the connection. To them, I'm just a name on a plaque, not a person." Mr. Reynolds set the wooden box aside. "After I retired, I traveled for many years. When I returned to the city, I wanted simplicity. Anonymity. The apartment on Maple Street suited me perfectly." Ethan's mind raced through the implications. "Does Principal Gardner know you live in the neighborhood?" "Oh, yes. We have lunch occasionally. He keeps me updated on the school's progress." Mr. Reynolds gave Ethan a meaningful look. He might have mentioned certain issues with student behavior. Bullying concerns. The realization hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You knew who I was. Before the fire, you knew I went to Westlake?" Mr. Reynolds nodded. "I knew of you, yes. Just as I know of several students in the neighborhood who attend my old school. I make it my business to keep informed." His eyes held Ethan's. But I had no idea about your character until the moment you appeared in my smoke-filled apartment. That revelation was entirely yours to make. The conversation was interrupted by a doctor's arrival, a different one from the emergency room, older and more formal. He greeted Mr. Reynolds warmly, checked his chart, and announced that discharge was approved for the following morning. "The nurse will bring your paperwork in the morning," the doctor said. "Do you have accommodation arranged?" "Yes, thank you, doctor. Everything's been sorted." After the doctor left, Ethan found himself struggling to process all he'd learned. The quiet old man from 4B was actually Gerald Reynolds, founder of Westlake High. The school he dreaded going to each day had been built by the very person whose life he'd saved. "You have questions, Mr. Reynolds observed, watching Ethan's face. "That's understandable." "Where will you go?" "After you're discharged? I've arranged a room at the Westview Hotel for the time being, until the apartment building is repaired, or I find more permanent accommodations." Ethan remembered his suggestion from the previous day. "What about Sunrise? Where my mom works?" "Ah, yes. A kind offer, but I'm not quite ready for a care facility, despite my recent misadventure." Mr. Reynolds smiled. "Though perhaps you could introduce me to your mother sometime. I'd like to meet the woman who raised such a remarkable young man." The compliment made Ethan uncomfortable, as praise always did. He changed the subject. "Will you tell people? At school, I mean. About who you are?" Mr. Reynolds considered the question. "I hadn't planned to make a grand announcement, but I won't hide it if asked directly." He studied Ethan curiously. "Would it bother you if people knew?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Everything's already weird enough. People keep looking at me differently, talking to me. Because of the fire." "Yeah. And you'd prefer things to go back to the way they were?" "Being invisible?" Ethan started to say yes, but stopped himself. The truth was more complicated. "I don't want attention for something that was just instinct. Like you said, it doesn't feel like me." "But it is you, Ethan." Mr. Reynolds leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "That instinct, that core reaction, that's the truest version of yourself. The person you are when all the fear and doubt and social anxiety is stripped away." He reached out and placed a weathered hand on Ethan's arm. "The reason people are responding differently to you isn't just because of what you did. It's because they're seeing something in you that was always there, but hidden. A light that was dimmed but never extinguished." The word struck Ethan with unexpected force. A light that was dimmed but never extinguished. It sounded like something from a poem or a movie, not something that could apply to him. Ethan Parker, the kid who spent most days trying to become invisible. "I should go," he said, suddenly needing space to think. "My mom will be up soon, and I haven't started dinner." Mr. Reynolds nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Thank you for bringing my things. It means a great deal." At the door, Ethan paused. "Will I see you again? After you leave the hospital?" "I certainly hope so." Mr. Reynolds smiled. "I think we have much more to talk about, you and I." The weekend passed in a blur of homework, chores, and attempts to process everything that had happened. Ethan told his mother about the fire and Mr. Reynolds, though he left out the revelation about the old man's identity. That particular piece of information still felt too surreal, too personally significant to share casually. Maria Parker had listened to her son's story with wide eyes, then pulled him into a fierce hug that lasted longer than usual. "My brave boy," she'd whispered against his hair. "My good, brave boy." The words had lodged somewhere in Ethan's chest, warming him from the inside like a small flame. Sunday night, as he was preparing for bed, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Working on follow-up story. Need more details about Mr. Reynolds. Coffee tomorrow after school?" Ethan stared at the message. Tomorrow was Monday, the first full school day since the fire, since the newspaper article. The thought of facing everyone made his stomach churn. Then he thought of Mr. Reynolds' words, a light that was dimmed but never extinguished. "Sure," he texted back, "but there's something you should know about him first." Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of half-hearted rain that couldn't decide whether to stop or to commit fully. Ethan stood at the school entrance, watching students hurry inside with hunched shoulders and raised hoods. "You going in, or just admiring the architecture?" He turned to find Lily beside him, dark hair damp from the rain, an amused expression on her face. "Just mentally preparing," he admitted. "For your legions of new admirers?" She grinned at his discomfort. "Come on, hero. I'll walk you to homeroom." The attention was just as uncomfortable as Ethan had anticipated. Stares, whispers, casual greetings from people who'd never acknowledged his existence before. But Lily's presence beside him made it bearable somehow, her casual confidence creating a buffer between him and the rest of the world. In English class, Ms. Brennan asked if he'd be willing to share his experience for their unit on personal narrative. In math, Mr. Hawkins used the fire rescue as an example of real-world probability calculations. If a building has 24 apartments and one resident still inside, what are the chances of finding them in time? By lunchtime, Ethan was exhausted from the constant awareness of being seen. He grabbed his tray and headed for his usual isolated corner, only to find Lily already there, saving him a seat. "You survived the morning," she observed as he sat down. "How does it feel to be Westlake's biggest celebrity?" "Terrible," he muttered, picking up his fork. "I don't know how actual famous people do this. They get paid millions of dollars, which probably helps." She took a bite of her sandwich. "So this bombshell you were going to drop about Mr. Reynolds. What is it?" Ethan glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "He's Gerald Reynolds. As in, the founder of this school, the guy the West Wing Library is named after." Lily's sandwich paused halfway to her mouth. "You're joking." "I'm not. He told me Friday evening. Showed me old photos and everything. But that's..." Lily set her sandwich down, mind visibly racing. "That's incredible. That's the best possible angle for the follow-up piece. Teen hero saves school founder. It writes itself." "I don't know if he wants that publicized," Ethan cautioned. He seemed pretty content with his anonymity. "Did he ask you not to tell anyone?" "Not specifically, no." "Then it's fair game." Lily's eyes gleamed with journalistic excitement. "This is huge, Ethan. Like potentially bigger than just the school paper? The local news might pick it up." The thought made Ethan's stomach clench. "I don't want to be on the news." Lily studied him for a moment, her excitement dimming as she registered his discomfort. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll keep it lower profile. Just the school paper. But it's still a great story, and people should know." Before Ethan could respond, a shadow fell across their table. He looked up to find Derek Simmons standing there, surprisingly without his usual entourage. "Parker," Derek said, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "Got a minute?" Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Lily, who raised her eyebrows but remained silent. "Sure," Ethan said cautiously. Derek shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to say, about before, the stuff with your locker and the other things." He took a deep breath. "It was messed up. What we did." The admission caught Ethan completely off guard. Derek Simmons, lacrosse star, social king, and architect of Ethan's high school misery, was apologizing. "Sort of." "Okay," Ethan said slowly, not sure what else to say. "Anyway," Derek continued, "just wanted to say it won't happen again. And if anyone else gives you shit, let me know." He nodded once as if confirming something to himself, then walked away before Ethan could respond. "Did that just happen?" Ethan asked, turning to Lily in disbelief. "Apparently, saving elderly community pillars from burning buildings earns you a free pass from bullying." Lily looked impressed despite herself. Not the worst social currency. After school, they met at a small coffee shop 2 blocks from campus. As they settled into a corner table with their drinks, Lily pulled out her notebook. "Okay, so tell me everything about Gerald Reynolds, Westlake founder and secret neighbor." Ethan recounted what Mr. Reynolds had shared, the founding of the school with his wife Eleanor, his retirement after her passing, his desire for a simpler life away from the spotlight. "And he's been living in that apartment all this time? Just observing the school from a distance?" Lily shook her head in amazement. "It's like something from a movie. I think he likes being connected to the school without the responsibility or attention," Ethan said. "He mentioned having lunch with Principal Gardner sometimes." Lily's eyebrows shot up. "Gardner knows? And he never mentioned it to anyone?" "Apparently." As Lily continued taking notes, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ethan, it's Gerald Reynolds. The hospital provided your contact information. I've been discharged and am settling into Westview. Would you be available to visit this evening? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Ethan showed the message to Lily. "You should go," she said immediately. "Find out what he wants to discuss. Want to come with me?" The invitation surprised them both. Lily recovered first, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Absolutely. The mysterious founder wants a meeting with his rescuer? I wouldn't miss it." They agreed to meet at the Westview Hotel at 7. As they were leaving the coffee shop, Lily suddenly stopped. "I almost forgot to ask, how do you feel about all this? Finding out the man you saved is basically Westlake royalty?" Ethan considered the question. "Honestly, it doesn't change anything for me. He was just an old man who needed help. The fact that he founded the school is, he shrugged. It's interesting, but it doesn't make what happened any more or less important. Lily studied him with a thoughtful expression. That's exactly why it's a good story, Ethan. Because you'd have done the same thing no matter who he was. The Westview Hotel was one of the nicest in the city, not ostentatiously luxurious, but elegant in an old-fashioned way, with polished wood paneling and brass fixtures. Ethan, in his worn jeans and plain sweater, felt immediately out of place in the ornate lobby. Lily, arriving a few minutes later, seemed entirely unfazed by the surroundings. "Room 512, she announced. I called ahead. At Ethan's surprised look, she added, "Journalistic initiative." The fifth-floor corridor was hushed and thickly carpeted, their footsteps silenced as they made their way to Mr. Reynolds' door. Ethan knocked tentatively. The door opened to reveal Mr. Reynolds, looking remarkably recovered, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, his white hair neatly combed. The only evidence of his ordeal was a slight pallor and the faint smell of medicinal ointment. "Ethan," he said warmly. Then, noticing Lily, his expression brightened further. "And Miss Chen, what a pleasant surprise." He gestured them inside. "Please come in." The hotel suite was spacious and tastefully appointed, with a small sitting area where a tea service had been arranged on a coffee table. "I took the liberty of ordering some refreshments," Mr. Reynolds said, indicating they should sit. "I find hotel rooms rather sterile without small touches of hospitality." As they settled onto the sofa, Ethan glanced around the suite. Unlike the sparse apartment on Maple Street, this space already showed signs of Mr. Reynolds' personality. Books stacked on the desk, a weathered leather briefcase, the wooden box Ethan had retrieved sitting open on the sideboard. "How are you feeling, sir?" Lily asked, pulling out her ever-present notebook. "Much improved, thank you." Mr. Reynolds poured tea into 3 cups. "Though the doctor insists I take things slowly for the next few weeks, smoke inhalation apparently requires more recovery time than one might expect." He handed them each a cup before sitting in the armchair opposite. "I must admit, I'm curious about what Ethan might have told you regarding our last conversation." Lily glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly. "He mentioned that you're Gerald Reynolds, the founder of Westlake High," she said, "and that you've been living somewhat anonymously in the community." "Ah," Mr. Reynolds sipped his tea. "And as a journalist, I imagine you find that rather newsworthy." "Yes, sir. Very much so." "I suspected as much." There was no accusation in his tone, just thoughtful acceptance. "Well, I won't ask you to keep it quiet. Truth be told, perhaps it's time for me to step a bit more into the light again." The statement seemed to hold deeper meaning, as if Mr. Reynolds was coming to a decision that had been long in the making. "Which brings me to why I asked Ethan here this evening." He set his teacup down carefully. "I've been doing quite a bit of thinking these past few days about destiny, coincidence, and the curious ways in which lives intersect." His gaze shifted to Ethan. "Do you believe in fate, young man?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I've never really thought about it. I've thought about little else since waking up in that hospital bed." Mr. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "Consider the improbability of our situation. Of all the people who might have been in that hallway when the fire broke out, it was you, a student from the very school I founded nearly 50 years ago. And not just any student, but one who, I've been told, has faced considerable challenges there." He glanced at Lily, who was scribbling rapidly in her notebook. "Miss Chen, would you mind terribly if I spoke with Ethan privately for a moment? I promise you'll have your interview afterward." Lily looked up, surprised but professional. "Of course. I can step out. No need to leave entirely. Perhaps just explore the hotel's rather impressive lobby for 10 minutes or so." After Lily had left, Mr. Reynolds rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights beginning to flicker on in the dusk. "Ethan, what I'm about to say may seem unusual, even presumptuous, coming from someone who was a stranger to you just days ago." He turned back to face Ethan. "But I've been given a rare opportunity, the chance to directly thank the person who saved my life, and perhaps to offer something meaningful in return." He returned to his seat, leaning forward earnestly. "When I founded Westlake Academy in 1974, I had a vision, not just of academic excellence, but of a community where every student felt valued, seen, and safe, where education wasn't just about facts and figures, but about developing character and compassion." A shadow crossed his face. "Over the years, particularly after Eleanor passed, I watched from a distance as aspects of that vision were compromised. Budget constraints, changing priorities, the constant pressure of test scores and college admissions. It's not a bad school, Ethan felt compelled to say. The teachers are mostly good. I'm sure they are. But a school is more than its curriculum, isn't it? It's also about how students treat one another, how the community functions as a whole. Mr. Reynolds' blue eyes held Ethan steadily. Your experience at Westlake concerns me deeply, not just as its founder, but as someone who now owes you a debt that can never fully be repaid. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the coffee table between them. Each year, the Reynolds Foundation provides scholarships to deserving students. These are typically announced at the end of the academic year, but given the circumstances, I'm exercising my prerogative to make an exception. Ethan stared at the envelope, not comprehending. A scholarship? For university, Mr. Reynolds clarified. A full scholarship to the institution of your choice, provided you maintain your current academic standing through graduation. The words hung in the air, too enormous for Ethan to fully grasp. A full scholarship? To any university. The financial burden of college had been a constant, looming anxiety for both him and his mother, a problem they'd silently agreed to worry about later. I don't know what to say, Ethan stammered. That's incredibly generous, but it's not charity, Mr. Reynolds said firmly. Nor is it payment for saving my life. That would be impossible to quantify. Rather, think of it as an investment in potential that I recognized long before the fire. Principal Gardner speaks very highly of your academic abilities, particularly in mathematics and sciences. Ethan blinked in surprise. The principal knew who he was? But that's not all, Mr. Reynolds continued. I'd also like to establish a program at Westlake, an anti-bullying initiative with real teeth, student-led, but with administrative support and accountability. And I'd like you to help design it. Me? But I'm not. I don't know anything about creating programs. You know the most important part, what it feels like to be on the receiving end. Mr. Reynolds' expression was earnest. Your perspective would be invaluable. Ethan's mind raced. The scholarship alone was life-changing. But this, the chance to actually make Westlake different for kids like him, was something he'd never even thought to wish for. Can I think about it? He asked finally. The program part, I mean. Of course, Mr. Reynolds smiled. Take all the time you need. The scholarship, however, is non-negotiable. You've earned that many times over. A gentle knock at the door signaled Lily's return. Mr. Reynolds called for her to enter, rising to greet her with renewed energy. Perfect timing, miss. Chen, I believe I promised you an interview, and I'm a man of my word. He gestured her to the sofa beside Ethan. But first, I wonder if you might be interested in an exclusive story about a new initiative at Westlake High. Lily's eyes widened as Mr. Reynolds outlined the anti-bullying program he envisioned, one that would bear Ethan's name, with substantial funding from the Reynolds Foundation and a launch plan for the following semester. This is incredible, she said, pen flying across her notebook. The school board has already approved this? They will, Mr. Reynolds said with the quiet confidence of someone used to having his suggestions implemented. Principal Gardner and I have already discussed the framework. The details will be developed in the coming weeks with Ethan's input, of course. As Lily continued her interview, asking about Mr. Reynolds' history with the school and his vision for its future, Ethan sat in a daze, the envelope containing his scholarship resting in his hands like something fragile and precious. The conversation flowed around him, Mr. Reynolds charming and articulate, Lily professional and incisive, while Ethan's mind tried to process the seismic shift in his reality. Just 1 week ago, he had been invisible, unremarkable, a boy whose greatest aspiration was merely to survive high school with minimal damage. Now he was sitting in a luxury hotel suite with the founder of his school, holding a guaranteed future in his hands, discussing a program that would bear his name, all because he'd run into a burning building without thinking. Spring arrived at Westlake High with an explosion of cherry blossoms and renewed energy. 3 months had passed since the fire, and if anyone had told Ethan back in January how different his life would be by April, he would have assumed they were mocking him. The Parker Initiative, as the anti-bullying program had been officially named, launched with a school-wide assembly in February. Ethan, standing at the podium beside Mr. Reynolds and Principal Gardner, had somehow found the courage to speak to the entire student body. About courage, about kindness, about the responsibility they each had to create the community they wanted to live in. Derek Simmons, surprisingly, had been one of the first to volunteer as a peer counselor for the program. Redemption arc. Lily had whispered to Ethan when they saw his name on the volunteer list. But whatever his reasons, Derek had proven to be an effective advocate, his social capital helping to legitimize the initiative among the school's athletic community. The newspaper article about Gerald Reynolds, Westlake founder returns from the shadows, had indeed been picked up by local media, resulting in a feature on the evening news. Mr. Reynolds had insisted that Ethan appear in the segment with him, despite Ethan's protests. The story isn't complete without both of us, he'd said simply. Now, as Ethan walked through the main entrance of Westlake High, he no longer hunched his shoulders or averted his eyes. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had discovered his own worth, not through others' validation, but through the recognition of his own intrinsic character. Parker, wait up. Ethan turned to see Lily jogging toward him, camera bag bouncing against her hip. In the months since the fire, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them put a label on, but which held the tentative promise of something more. You're late, he observed as she fell into step beside him. That's new. Blame Mr. Reynolds. He called this morning with just one more idea for the mentorship component. She rolled her eyes, but her expression was fond. The man never stops thinking about how to improve this place. Since his recovery, Mr. Reynolds had become a regular presence at Westlake, unofficially advising on various programs and initiatives. He'd moved into a comfortable condo near the school, explaining that his time in the hotel had reminded him how much he disliked transient living. The apartment on Maple Street remained unrepaired, the building's future uncertain amidst insurance disputes. Did you decide? Lily asked as they approached Ethan's locker. No longer defaced, now decorated with robotics team magnets and a calendar of college application deadlines. MIT, Ethan said, a smile spreading across his face despite his attempt to sound casual. I got the acceptance yesterday. Lily's squeal of excitement drew looks from passing students. I knew it. When are you telling Mr. Reynolds? We're having dinner tonight. Mom's cooking, which has her completely stressed out. She's made me taste test 3 different pasta sauces. The thought of his mother, who had initially been too intimidated to speak to Gerald Reynolds, and who now routinely scolded him for not eating enough, made Ethan smile. The older man had become a fixture in their lives, a mentor to Ethan, and increasingly, a valued friend to Maria Parker. He'll be thrilled, Lily said confidently. He's been not so subtly hinting about MIT being the perfect fit for you for months. As they walked toward their first class, Ethan noticed a freshman being shoved against a locker by a larger boy. Without hesitation, he changed direction, Lily right beside him. Everything okay here? Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. The older boy turned, recognizing Ethan immediately. The Parker Initiative's influence was such that even new students knew who Ethan was. The boy stepped back, muttering an excuse about just joking around. Let's try a different kind of joke, Ethan suggested. One where everyone's laughing, not just you. After the boy had walked away, Ethan turned to the freshman. You good? The younger student nodded, eyes wide with recognition. You're Ethan Parker, right? The guy who started the anti-bullying thing and saved that old dude from a fire? That's one way to put it, Ethan said with a small smile. What's your name? Marcus. I just transferred here last month. Well, Marcus, if anyone gives you trouble, the peer counselors have an office next to the guidance department. Or you can find me. He gestured toward the cafeteria. I'm usually at the table by the windows at lunch. As they continued to class, Lily bumped Ethan's shoulder with her own. Look at you, mister. School celebrity dispensing wisdom to the underclassmen. Shut up, Ethan muttered, but without heat. The truth was, he'd grown almost comfortable with his visibility. Not because he craved attention, but because he discovered that being seen, truly seen, meant having the power to affect change. The final bell rang just as they slid into their seats in AP Physics. As Mr. Greenberg began his lecture on electromagnetic fields, Ethan's phone vibrated with a text from Mr. Reynolds. Heard the good news about MIT. Always knew you had it in you. Looking forward to tonight's celebration. Bringing dessert, don't tell your mother. It's a surprise. Ethan smiled, tucking the phone away. 3 months ago, he'd been invisible, inconsequential. Now he was connected to his school, to his future, to people who saw his worth and reflected it back to him. A bullied teen saved an elderly man from a fire, not realizing he was the school's founder. And in doing so, he had saved himself.